This series was based on the world of pirates, where pirates live. In Logtown 22 years ago, they were gathered to see the execution of the king of pirates, Gold Roger. This person wasn't scared of death. Instead, he knew many pirates would be born after his death. Before his death, one of the pirates inquired about his treasure. Then he responded to them to explore the sea and find themselves. Listening to this, the crowd became uncontrollable, and guards killed him by penetrating the swords. After this, many pirates who wanted to have the treasure of Gold Roger were born. One of them was Monkey D. Luffy, who was in the East Sea in his shabby boat. It was his first day throwing water out of the ship, and it was surprising that he didn't know how to swim. His only dream was to grab one piece, which meant he wanted to acquire Gold Roger's treasure and become king of pirates. During daydreaming, a flood of water started coming into his boat, so he hid inside the box, flowing into the sea. When he woke up, it was the following day when two ships were throwing cannons at each other. The captain of one of the ships was a woman, Alvida, who wanted to eliminate her rival with her own hands. So she jumped to the other ship through rope and started massacring the people, but could not find her prey, Roronoa Zoro. Alvida also killed one of the opposite pirates with her weapon because her name wasn't on his Roronoa Zoro list. Also, she called Kobe to wipe out her mess. Without complaint, Kobe arrived and started cleaning. At night, when Kobe was washing her weapon, he heard an intruder's voice was none other than Luffy. Luffy asked him not to shout and pretend to be the future king of pirates, but Kobe refused to consider him a pirate. According to him, pirates were cruel, and Luffy was not like them. In flashback, we look at young Luffy, who knew Shank, captain, would arrive. That's why he came out of his place and met with him. Luffy asked him if he could be a pirate, but Shank knew this way could be challenging. Therefore, he didn't allow him, but Luffy moved to the high place and put the dagger near his eye. He had proved that he would become a pirate in the future. Just then, Luffy shared his plan to move to the Grand Line, where the most dangerous creatures were. But Luffy was not terrified and was chilled, as if none would harm him. Watching his innocence, Kobe helped him escape from here before Alvida awakened. But Luffy accidentally rang the bell, which awoke everyone. On Sixis Island, Roronoa Zoro lit candles to remember his loved ones. Just then, Mr. Seven arrived and asked him to join his Baroque work, but he declined, and an iconic war started. Roronoa Zoro turns him into two pieces by swinging his sword. In Alvida's ship, Alvida arrived here in a pissed mood, and one of her subordinates shot at Luffy, but this bullet didn't harm him. Instead, it jumped back to the shooter. Further, Alvida used her weapon to harm him, but it bounced back. None could hurt him, and he was bored with this fight. So, he expanded his hand, which humans couldn't do, and gave a solid punch to Alvida, which threw her out of the ship. Now, none dared to challenge him, and Luffy brought Kobe with him and set on the journey with the boat. Kobe was shocked about his flexible body, so he inquired about him. The scene jumps to the past, where Shank was bandaging Luffy's wound and hopeful he would be a great pirate. When Shank moved outside, Luffy looked at the box where there was a devil fruit he had eaten. At the same time, another pirate arrived and provoked Shank to fight by dropping the drink and other pots. But Shank stayed calm, which made Luffy angry. When Shank tried to calm him down, he held his hand, which expanded. On their boat, Kobe shared his dream of serving people by adopting the profession of marina. Luffy admired him and also decided to leave him to Marine Base, where he would get a map of the Grand Line. On the other hand, another character was seen in miserable condition on the boat. She was pretending because she wanted to have another ship that tried to rob her equipment, but she was 10 steps ahead of them. In Shellstown, Marine's branch, they were seated in the cafe where everyone was busy drinking. Roronoa Zoro and Nami were already there. Nami was flirting with Marine, and Roronoa Zoro talked with a sweet girl who had prepared rice balls for Roronoa Zoro. Suddenly, a scoundrel encountered her, dropped her rice ball, and insulted the girl. Roronoa Zoro tasted crushed rice balls and asked this scoundrel to apologize to a girl, but he didn't. As a result, Roronoa Zoro started beating the Marine with his elegant moves. Apart from this, Nami bashed Marine's head on the shelf and put on his uniform. Also, Scoundrel was the son of Captain Morgan, so he didn't kill him because he would take him to his father for a reward. Watching their fight, Luffy was inspired by him. When he reached him, Captain Morgan was impressed with him and asked him to join, but he refused. Now he has two choices: face the penalty to beat Marine or join him. Marines preferred to stay 7 days hungry as punishment. At night, Luffy called Kobe to prepare the boat until he returned because he had found a way to get inside. In the morning, Luffy got outside the tunnel and looked at Roronoa Zoro, who was bound, and Morgan's son tried to torture him by saying his father wouldn't leave him. Luffy, who was already impressed by him, unbound him. Also, he knew Roronoa Zoro could kill him because he was a renowned pirate hunter. The scene shifts to Nami, who was finding out the map in the basement, but it was in Morgan's office. Also, the Marine had seen him because he was the same person whose uniform she had stolen, but she didn't allow him to do anything and knocked him down with her fighting skills. Further, Luffy arrived here who had listened everything, so they decided to work together, but they weren't crew. On the way, they met with Morgan, whom she had fooled easily, and snatched the keys to the office. Finding out the office, they searched the map, which had been exposed when Luffy touched the weapon. It was a locker, and she tried to open it. But Morgan realized the pirates were here who were none other than this red-headed girl. However, Morgan banged on the door, and Luffy tried to pull the locker with his flexible hand. The safe had separated from the floor, but they fell from the window due to his flexibility, and plenty of soldiers were ready to beat them. In contrast, they knocked them down, and Morgan arrived, whose body was too strong. Luckily, Roronoa Zoro also arrived to help them. Roronoa Zoro and Luffy teach him lessons with fantastic coordination. They were about to escape from here in the boat by carrying the locker when Morgan's son arrived, but he was fainted by Kobe, who had decided to stay here to follow his dream. By saying goodbye, they set off on their journey. Apart from this, another head of Marine was updated about the Grand Line map, so he moved their ship to this place. Another pirate was also informed of the incident and planned to get it back. In flashback, Luffy was practicing his new skill of Devil Fruit. Shank arrived and revealed they would locate One Piece, and they will not be returned. Listening to this, he was upset. Aside from this, Nami had opened the locker with close observation. Even Luffy was making noise, but she had done a great job. She also told them about the Grand Line when they heard a voice and realized Marine had arrived and red smoke had made them faint. Before losing consciousness, Luffy didn't forget to consume the map. When they awoke, they were in a wooden box, and they took their weapons. They are worried about the map, but Luffy calms them because the map is in a safe place. Just then, the wooden box opened, and Buggy arrived, who was a pirate and had imprisoned the people of this island. They are all puppets in Buggy's hand, who forced them to laugh at his lame jokes. Buggy, who had already listened to the map, inquired from Luffy about it. Luffy and Buggy wanted to be king of pirates and have a Grand Line map. Nima proved brilliant and threw Luffy's cap up, and Luffy caught his cap by expanding his hand. She tried to escape but was stunned by the devastation of the island. She was taken back and was on Buggy's mercy. Buggy asked them to throw in the green room as they were not ready to discuss the map. On Shell's Island, Vice Admiral Garp arrived, who had captured the king of pirate Gold Roger. Morgan was bragging about his power, but Garp knew what had happened. Also, he looked at Kobe, who looked suspicious to him. Apart from this, Roronoa Zoro was hanging from the board, and Nami was caged. But she had found a stick through which she could open the lock, but she required time. Also, he listens to yelling at Luffy because Buggy is torturing him by stretching his body from 4 sides. Even though he was in pain, he smiled, and Buggy looked at his hat. He understood it belonged to Shanks. Shanks and Buggy were both friends, but he accused him of being jealous, which wasn't true. Buggy spoke ill about him, which was intolerable. Further, he asked someone to stretch his body until it turned into pieces, but this commoner refused. In anger, Buggy caught a child he wanted to kill at Luffy's place, but Luffy became ferocious and freed himself from the ropes. Also, he punches him by expanding his hand, but it's useless. Although his head had split off, his head rejoined his body. It revealed that Buggy also had eaten devil fruit and his body was a weapon. He made him faint by creating a red smoke through his split hand. On the other hand, she was trying to open the lock, but Kabaji had arrived and wanted revenge on Roronoa Zoro. Roronoa Zoro was responsible for his brother's death, and he started playing with him by giving a circle to the board where he was hanging. Not only this, he was throwing a knife at him. Moreover, Garp called Kobe, which compelled him to tell about his friends. He had no choice, so he revealed and decided not to support Pirate because they were Moran's enemy. In the past, when the same scoundrel arrived, Luffy humiliated him. Consequently, This pirate started strangling him when Shank came and started beating the opponents. Shank could endure his insult, but couldn't let anyone hurt his mates. When they had tasted the dust of their rivals, they found Luffy was missing. Apart from this, Luffy was in a tank where water was falling through the pipe. Luffy is always terrified of water, and he uses his weakness to know the location of the Grand Line's map. Also, Buggy told him that his friends wouldn't arrive to rescue him, so he should tell him. And as a reward, he promised to make him the right hand of his team. Luffy declined his offer, and Buggy turned on the tap and water reached his neck. In the past, scoundrels had taken Luffy to the sea, and they were in the middle of the sea. Just then, a monster turned their ship, and Luffy drowned, but Shank arrived and saved him at the right time. Also, the monster came and was in front of Shank, but he wasn't scared and ordered him to get lost. According to the order, he had moved from him, and Luffy embraced him. Soon, he realized Shank had lost his arm because of him. Nevertheless, Roronoa Zoro was still on board, and Kabaji threw knives at him. Luckily, Nami had opened the lock, and she kicked Kabaji, and Roronoa Zoro threw him to the ground. They arrived at Luffy, who was drowning in the water, and pointed at his friends. Nami threw the stick at Luffy's tank, and the tank broke. Luffy was freed, and Roronoa Zoro swung his swords and chopped his body. But they were not familiar with his ability, in which he could rejoin his body. He used his body as a weapon and bashed them to the ground. It's Luffy's turn to show his skills. He punched, which had made a hole in his stomach, but it had rejoined. Luffy looked around and noticed boxes. He had got an idea. He asked his friends to put all his body pieces into boxes, and they started throwing them into the boxes. Only his head and foot remained together, and Luffy threw them away with his punch. Before going from there, he didn't forget to free the commoners who thought they would become his prisoners. But Luffy was different from them. He demanded nothing. Aside from this, Garp announced that he was about to destroy the dream of Pirated, who wanted to go to the Grand Line, and Kobe would help him in this expedition. Also, Morgan was bound with the rope because he couldn't do his duty. Also, they offered him food as gratitude, but Luffy only took one piece because he knew they needed more than him. In the past, Shank had given Luffy his hat by saying this hat was his whole world, and Luffy also loved this hat a lot. In fighting with Buggy, his hat needed maintenance, and Nima fixed it because she knew this hat was a treasure for him. Later, she went to her room, called someone, and informed them that she had found a map. The scene shifts to Syrup Village, where Usopp, a young child, proclaimed by ringing an emergency bell that pirates were coming. But nobody takes him seriously. On the other hand, Luffy's ship was shown that it had leaked, which means they need to grab a new one as soon as possible. Nami was worried about her phone that had been demolished. To acquire the ship, they decided to move to Syrup Village, famous for creating ships. Apart from this, Garp's ship was seen where Morgan's son had made a wrong knot. To fix this, Kobe arrived and knotted perfectly. Morgan's son scolded him for being smart. Just then, Garp arrived and appreciated him for the knot, and he called him to play a game where mind would be used. Also, they reached the Syrup Village, where criminals' posters were attached to the wall, and Buggy was one of them. Buggy had returned and gained his body parts when Arlong's man who wanted to meet with him arrived, but he refused and started fighting with him. Arlong's man was strong enough to make him faint with his few moves. Apart from this, Luffy and his friends were looking for a ship they could buy, but Nami was planning to steal it because they didn't have money. It was against his rules because Luffy wanted to purchase it, not by robbery. At last, he had obsessed with a ship with everything he wanted. Here they met with Usopp, who was the caretaker of this ship, and also knew about the owner, Kaya, who owned this whole shipyard. He took them to a luxurious place. They were hypnotized by watching a single glance. Usopp took them into the house through a backside door, where Bucci threw his knife at him because he was not allowed there. Before something serious happened, Kaya arrived with his butler, Kalidor, who didn't want their company for Kaya. But Usopp wished Kaya's birthday. She was about to turn 18. During the celebration, she asked them to join her for dinner and convinced Kalidor to do this. Kalidor, who felt nostalgic by looking at their clothes, ordered them to change their clothes before dinner. Moreover, Usopp got inside Kaya's room to give her a gift. That was a giant pearl. He also narrated his tale of grabbing the giant pearl, but she always loved to listen to his adventures. So she was pleased, and Usopp was concerned about her deteriorated condition. Aside from this, Luffy and his crew were trying on the dress when Roronoa Zoro realized that he had already seen Calidore before. Nami didn't think so, and Roronoa Zoro dropped this idea for this time. On the other hand, Calidore presented blue tea to Kaya, which she thought was medicine because she felt right after drinking it. She considered him everything because he had taken care of her after the death of her parents. In the kitchen, Buchi and Champ were preparing weird soup. When Buchi was about to taste it, Champ forbade him. Something odd was going on there. Kobe and Garp were playing in the Garp's room, but Kobe lost because he was continuously thinking about victory. When Garp set the time, victory was on Kobe's hand. However, the birthday party started when Nami showed interest in Mary, who was dealing with the property of Kaya. Just then, Kaya arrived, and Mary wanted to discuss something important with Kaya, but Calidore didn't allow him and asked them to enjoy themselves. Also, Luffy made a bet with Nami that he would convince her to give the ship free. At the dinner, everyone was having dinner happily, and Luffy announced that he was a pirate and was taking an interest in her ship. Before Kaya trapped in Luffy's hand, Calidore asked them to get out of this place, but Kaya ordered them to stay at night. In the Garp room, Morgan's son arrived and asked Garp about the clues of pirates in the syrup. As a result, he had given the command in Kobe's hand, who was efficient for this post. Morgan was becoming jealous because this post should belong to him. Moreover, Mary met with Calidore and asked him to meet with Kaya, but he was not allowed. Kaya turned 18 after that night, and sharing her property with Calidore was suspicious. By meeting with Kaya, he wanted to discuss this point. Calidore didn't permit him and killed him by penetrating his 5 knives into his body. Also, he had exceptional speed, which humans couldn't possess. Buggy was bounded at the Buggy's place. Arlong had kidnapped him. Further, he wanted to kill him for messing at his place and didn't share his part. Before he eliminated him, Buggy updated him about Luffy, who had stolen the map, and he could help him to find him because he was Buggy, who knew the news. Late at night, Luffy and Roronoa Zoro were out of their room because Luffy wanted to eat more food, and Roronoa Zoro was thirsty. With the help of Luffy's nose, they were searching for kitchen. In addition, Nami was also not resting. She was stealing precious things from the house, and when she heard the noise, she ran into Kaya's room. Kaya was polite and humble and understood she was stealing things from her house. Despite this, she called Nima her friend, and both started communicating like besties. In the kitchen, Usopp was already there who was shooting, and Luffy admired his shooting skills. During the conversation, Luffy revealed that Usopp's father was with Shanks, and he had lived with him. Listening to their talking, Roronoa Zoro wanted to drink alcohol, which was placed in the basement. They headed to grab the bottle, but Luffy preferred to stay here and consumed soup prepared for Kaya. Arriving at the basement, they found the dead body of Mary, and he was not alone there because the murderer was also there. Calidore was not alone. Buki and Champ was with him. Also, Calidore was not his real name. He was Kuro, who was a captain and did many raids. Roronoa Zoro showed his swordsmanship, but it was nothing before his incredible speed. Calidore's mates didn't allow him to fight more because Champ broke the bottle by hitting his head, and Usopp escaped through a narrow way. Calidore was not worried about him because none would believe him. Saying goodbye to Kaya, Nami left her room and kept everything in their place. Also, Buchi and Champ threw Mary and Roronoa Zoro into the well. Like his habit, Usopp alerted the villagers that pirates had attacked them, but they considered him a liar. In the past, he used to do the same thing. This time, he was telling the truth, but none believed him. In the well, Roronoa Zoro had awoken and found himself in the cave. On the other hand, Kobe had found Usopp and believed in him, but Morgan asked him not to think of this messy man. He also told him about Luffy, who was a good-natured pirate. But Kobe was Miraine, thinking about his job more than his friendship. On the other hand, Nami reached into the kitchen and looked at Luffy, who was lying dead on the table. Nima heard a noise as if someone was coming, so she hid in the cabinet. Buchi and Champ revealed that this soup was filled with poison, and he had consumed it. Consequently, according to Champ, he had fainted and was about to die. Kuro ordered to throw him in the well. At the same time, the bell rang on the door, and he went to open the door. Kobe was there who inquired about Luffy and wanted to test his hands where knives could be. But when Kobe checked, there was nothing. He accused Usopp of being mentally upset. Listening to this, Usopp had fled by saying pirates had attacked. However, he could help him in finding Luffy, who was fainted. He ordered Shump and Buchi to hand over Luffy to Miranis. They gave him because they were sure he would die according to Champ idea. Suddenly, Nami got out of the cabinet and hit Shams's face. Kobe heard and wanted to inquire more, but Kuro shut the door in his mouth. 7 years ago, in Shimotsuki village, little Roronao Zoro was fighting with Queenie. They were swinging their sword, and Queen always won because Roronao Zoro always dropped his hand. Roronao Zoro believed that he could win if he didn't have to fight with a wooden sword. So, they planned to fight with a real one. Further, Usopp reached Kaya's room and told everything, but she was considering it tail and slapped for scaring him. Although she had hit him, Usopp decided not to leave her at any cost. On the other hand, time had up with Kaya. They didn't need to pretend to be loyal to her. Now, they were moving ahead to kill her, and before this, they didn't forget to turn on the security system. Bucci turned on security through which everything was locked. Aside from this, Nami had reached Kaya's room and updated her about his evil intention. She never imagined he would betray her. To open the security system, she moved to her father's room with a secret path. While going through this way, she started coughing, and Kuro recognized her behind the wall. He put his knives into the wall, which injured her, but she survived from death. The scene changes to Roronoa Zoro, who was throwing the hook out of the wall but not sticking to something. Just then, he recalled the past when Queen and Roronoa Zoro fought with swords, but he smashed him to the ground every time. He realized he couldn't beat Queenie, but she knew he would defeat her in the future. A girl could defeat a boy, but she hadn't any potential to beat the man. Listening to this, both swore to fight daily until one becomes the best swordsman. In the present, returning to their ship, Kobe sensed something extraordinary in Ruko, but Morgan's son asked him to put his attention to Luffy. He moved to Luffy and made fun of him when Luffy vomited at him. Aside from this, Kaya had reached her father's room and was very upset. There was her parents' picture that was hanging on the wall. When she slid the picture, the tool appeared. They started to move it, but it had created a voice that attracted Kuro. By calling her name, he was moving toward her with a smile. In the well, Roronoa Zoro was trying to get out of the well by climbing. Just then, he remembered about his master, who updated him that Queen had died in the accident. Roronoa Zoro also went to the place wearing black clothes and demanded her sword, which was a relic. He had decided to become the best swordsman in the world through this sword. By thinking about this, he gets out of this trouble with his swords. Apart from this, Luffy regained his senses and asked Kobe to let him go because he wanted to save his friends. Luffy didn't allow him, but Roronoa Zoro arrived and punched Morgan's son and other Moraine. He knocked down them, only Kobe left, who tried to stop him, but Luffy warned him not to come his way because he wouldn't tolerate it. Suddenly, footsteps could be heard, so Kaya and Nami hid behind the table and Usopp hid behind the curtain. When Kuro arrived, he started hitting everything with knives. He wanted to avenge her for pissing him off for many years. Also, Roronoa Zoro and Luffy have reached inside the house by opening the iron gate. Luffy moved ahead, and Roronoa Zoro was there to handle Bucci and Champ. Aside from this, Kaya picked the knife from the table and was ready to attack him. Nami also assists him, but Kuro is vigilant, holds these girls with their hands, and wants to kill Kaya. But he couldn't do so because Kuro shot at his hand, which was grabbed in his gloves. He moved forward and punched Usopp hard and again followed his prey. On the other hand, Roronoa Zoro was busy fighting with Bucci and Champ. Both were giving a tough time by swinging their sword against Roronoa Zoro. It was an iconic sword fight, but it was unfair because Roronoa Zoro was alone. Again, he tried to penetrate his sword into Kaya's body, but Luffy gave heroic entry by holding his hand. Luffy wanted to punch him, but his speed was extraordinary so that he couldn't grab him. He hid behind the pillar, and Luffy beat him by hearing his shoe movement. Also, Roronoa Zoro proved dominant against those. At one moment, Champ snatches his sword, but he again acquires it by beating them. On the other hand, Luffy dodged his attacks and holded his hand. Luffy gave him an extraordinary move by punching him through his face. He had been kicked out from the window, and everyone was happy because he had defeated him. Roronoa Zoro also reached here after binding Kuro's mates. Miran was chasing them, so Kaya offered her ship to them. This was the same ship liked by Luffy, which resembled Mary. That's the reason he gave this ship the name Going Merry. Also, Luffy asked Usopp to accompany them because he was an excellent shooter. After saying goodbye to her, he had set on a journey with them. They all were pleased in the ship. Nami represented Navigator. Roronoa Zoro was resting and Usopp was eating popcorn. Luffy was seated on the goat's top. Aside from this, Kobe was ashamed from Garp because he couldn't complete the mission, but he was not angry with him. Kobe had helped them to get out of their safe place. While they were enjoying each other's company, the cannon dropped on the ship. When Luffy checked out through binoculars and realized he was his grandfather, the series proceeds where everyone was taken aback by hearing grandfather from his mouth, and his grandfather was throwing cannons on their ship. In the past, Luffy was young when his grandfather wanted to turn him into Moraine, but his sole interest was pirates. But his grandfather hated pirates, so he took him away for training. When he returned to the situation, he noticed cannons were destroying their ship. Nami asked him to run away, but Luffy preferred to face Moraine, and that's why he ordered Usopp to fire a cannon as a counterattack. But they were not used to it, so they dropped the cannon instead of firing. On the other hand, Garp asked them to surrender because he wanted to capture them alive. Luffy showed obstinacy and declined to obey him. As a result, Garp fired, but Luffy increased his stomach size and bounced back the cannon. Through this, the opposite team could not strike them for a while, and they availed this opportunity to run away. Also, Garp had gotten mad and started laughing at his failure. However, they had escaped, and Nami asked everyone to communicate with Luffy. Luffy was depressed after this incident, and Roronoa Zoro got closer to him and inquired if he wanted to talk about that incident. Luffy denied it, and he returned. At the same time, Luffy smelled meat and soya sauce and realized someone was cooking there. With the help of Luffy's nose, they have arrived at Barati. Brady was a restaurant where Zeph was in charge, and here, it was complicated to reserve the table. Luffy tried to convince through his famous dialogue he would become the king of pirates, so they should treat him properly, but he ignored him, and Nami reserved the table by giving him a handsome amount. Apart from this, Sanji cooked different dishes in the kitchen, but he was criticized for this dish and banished from the kitchen. After throwing, he became a waiter and taught guests lessons who were creating mess in the restaurant. Luffy was impressed with his fighting skills and ordered everything. Before leaving, he remembered flirting with Nami. On Garp's ship, many things had been destroyed, and it required 2 days to fix this problem. Kobe here advised to call the reinforcement, but Garp rejected it because he knew how to deal with him. He moved to his office and called Mihawk, the best swordsman. None could beat him. He was busy knocking down people this time with his extraordinary swordsmanship skill. Even when the captain tried to throw a cannon at him with his gun, he dodged and killed him with a swing of a sword. After this, he paid attention to Garp, who gave him a mission to bring Luffy here without harm. Kobe was listening to their conversation, hiding behind the wall. He was confused about how Miran took help from a pirate whom they wanted to demolish. In the hotel, Luffy enjoyed mouth-watering food, and when Sajin brought the bill, he signed and asked to keep it as his loan. But Zeph arrived angrily, without paying attention to his babbling about the king of pirates. He was asked to wash the pots to pay the bill. Also, Nami was worried about Miran because she didn't want to lose her freedom. To calm her mind, she ordered a drink and inquired about the way to Konomi Island. One mysterious man arrived, offered to leave her at Konomi Island, and asked her to prepare for dawn. At night, Kobe asked Morgan about Mihawk. Mihawk was the warlord of the sea who had made contact with Moraine. They would do what they asked, and Moran protected them in exchange. This contract was made because war could happen if contract didn't happen. Moreover, Luffy met with Sanji, who was seated and was keeping the pots. Luffy praised the unique dish which he had eaten. While doing this, he inquired about his dream. He wanted to go to All Blue, where special spices could be found, and he could become the world's best chef by using them. Listening to this, Luffy offered to join him, but he refused because he wanted to stay with this older man. Just then, a hungry pirate arrived, and Sajin moved to help him out. He prepared the yummy food for him, despite knowing he was asked not to cook. But he couldn't let this hungry man die. This man ate the food with relish and explained to Luffy that his captain also moved to grab one piece. But the consequences were disastrous because they lost 50 ships and 5,000 men on this journey. Only he had survived and advised him to throw this idea away if he wanted to live. Despite this, Luffy insisted on going there. In the hotel, Nami and Roronoa tried to get to know each other by drinking wine. Nima revealed she belonged to Orange Land and was very poor. Also, Roronoa disclosed that he had only one friend, Kuina. Apart from this, Kobe accused Garp of shaking hands with pirates, which was illegal. But Garp makes him understand that sometimes Moraine needs to decide against their wish to save the world's peace. Aside from this, Usopp was narrating the wrong tale to everyone about his adventure. Here, he met with Mihawk, who wanted to meet with his captain. So Usopp took him to his crew, where he inquired about Luffy. Roronoa recognized him at first glance and invited him for the duel. Nami declined him to do so, but Roronoa was not listening to her and decided to make it a fight at dawn. Mihawk also accepted the challenge and planned to kill him first. Luffy was washing the pots when Zeph arrived, and he told about the good nature of Sanji. Also, Usopp came and needed his help to save Roronoa from suicide. When they reached the ship, Roronoa Zoro was not ready to listen to anyone. Nami knew he was committing suicide because he was far superior to him in swordsmanship. Luffy was also in favor of Nami, but soon he realized becoming the best swordsman in the world was his dream, and he couldn't interrupt his plan. So, he has decided to support him. In a pissed mood, she started packing up things, and Roronoa was awake because his fight would be started. At dawn, Nami couldn't go by, leaving her friend in trouble. They reached the designated spot where Mihawk and Roronoa were about to fight. Watching Roronoa, he takes out his mini-sword because he doesn't want to kill him with his honorable sword, which he didn't deserve. When the fight started, he stopped his attack with his mini-sword and compelled him to step back. Every time he attacked, he faced failure. He injured his chest with lightning speed and broke his sword with immense power. Still, Roronoa continued his fight because stepping back from the war was his death. In honor of his bravery, he struck him with his honorable sword and walked away, saying he needed to be more vital to defeating him. In the miserable condition, he swore to never lose onward. They took him into their ship and worried about him. Right now, they needed a doctor to save their friend. Luffy went to Sanji and inquired about the doctor. Sanji was ready to help him. Also, Zeph moved to help Roronoa Zoro by bringing knives and giant fish. Arriving at the ship, Zeph starts drinking and chopping the fish, through which he can bandage him. By slicing the fish, he put them on his wounds and hoped to heal them, but his condition was critical, and he could die. Now, Mihawk at Garp's ship to tell him he had his own rules, and none could rule him. So he didn't bring his grandson because he knew his grandchild could find out the One Piece. He moved by saying this, but Garp had ruined the room in anger, and Kobe was watching all this. In the merry-going, Luffy's hunger was gone. He was only thinking about Roronoa Zoro and cleaning his sword. Sanji was preparing food and narrated him tale about Zeph, who was used to pirates. When he was young, he attacked their ship and poured oregano on his dish. Sanji refused to sprinkle oregano and spit out about all blue. Just then, a wave of sea arrived and crushed everything. When Sanji opened his eyes, Zeph and he were on a huge stone. Zeph gave him food and asked him to leave until the ship arrived. Sanji passed his days in loneliness and ate tiny food when needed most. After 70 days, everything had finished, and he was dying from hunger. So he thought about snatching the food from him. Also, he planned to kill him if he refused to give food. When Sanji reached there, he looked like he had eaten his foot to survive and had given all the food to him. He was shocked to see his kindled nature because he preferred to die and wanted to save him. He wanted to tell him that being a captain wasn't easy. Sometimes he had to sacrifice himself for his crew. He moved to Roronoa's room, where Nami accused him of not restraining him from fighting with Mihawk. Luffy was guilty, but couldn't hinder his friend's dream. On the Grap's ship, Kobe tries to convince him to let Luffy live as he wants to become pirate. If he didn't, he could die. Listening to his arguments, he looked like he had perceived Kobe's point, but couldn't. At the same time, Arlong had arrived in the barracks by bringing his mates. He was scaring everyone and not letting anyone go from here. Zeph arrived and asked him to enjoy the food without money. He agreed and asked to bring Luffy at any cost. If he didn't, he decided to kill everyone one by one. Also, Nami told them they needed to escape from here because Arlong had arrived. Listening to this, Zeph and other people were in trouble. Sanji moved to save him. Luffy wanted to accompany him because he couldn't let anyone die. Nami tried to stop him, but Luffy couldn't be responsible for many deaths. He asked Nami to take care of Roronoa Zoro. They headed to the hotel where Arlong humiliated humans because they were inferior. He held one of them with the collar, and when he was about to proceed to kill, Luffy arrived. Arlong made fun of Luffy because he was still a kid. Just then, Luffy needed clarification about how he had known about their location. Arlong removes Buggy from the sack, and Buggy rejoins his ear that was in his hat. Buggy had listened everything that they were talking about. Buggy was talking so much then, they again put his head in the sack, and a fight started between Luffy and Arlong. Luffy's attack was proving nothing because Arlong was dodging them. Further, Sanji tried to fight, but they proved futile, and Luffy was thrown out of the hotel. Luffy was made of rubber, so he didn't hurt, and wanted to attack him repeatedly through his mighty punch. But still, Arlong was strong. Arlong held Luffy in his hand and planned to kill him, but Nami arrived at the right time and asked him she had done her job. Now, they should move from here. Listening to this, Luffy was shocked, but Nami pretended to be a comrade of Arlong and moved. Also, he asked him to throw Luffy into the sea because there was no use in killing him. Agreeing with his opinion, he threw him into the water, and Luffy was drowning in the water when Sanji got into the sea and saved him. When Luffy got out of the water, he said Nami couldn't betray him, but she had already done so. On the other hand, Garp was telling everyone that they wouldn't let this matter quickly go. Garp decided to capture them and threw them in the cages. Kobe was taken aback because he was not expecting this. Now, the realization door was opening for him. In the Beirat Hotel, Zeph humiliates Sanji for cleaning the mess in the hotel. He was asking him to move on because he should set on a journey and find out All Blue. All Blue was dream of Zeph, but he couldn't accomplish, so he believed Sajin would figure it out. But Sajin didn't want to leave him alone, but Zeph compelled him to do so. He rejected him and moved forward to join Luffy's crew. Moreover, Luffy was seated with Roronoa and was sad because their crew had scattered. Luffy was feeling lonely because he hadn't been expecting from him. Luffy pleaded with him to return in his sense because he needed him a lot. At the same time, Roronoa awoke and Luffy was about to die with happiness. Just then, Roronoa promised to stay with him until he died, and Luffy decided to find Nami. After grabbing the food and other items, they set on their journey. Also, Sanji arrived to join them, and Luffy welcomed him into the crew because Sanji was the best cook. With tearful eyes, both said goodbye to each other. Here, Luffy announced that someone knew where she could be, and this person was no other than Buggy, whom Luffy had kidnapped. The story moves forward, where they threatened Buggy to take them to Konomi Island. Buggy was on their mercy, so how could he betray them? Roronoa Zoro thought she had left her crew by choice, but Sanji opposed this idea because she could have any reason to do this. Soon, they reached Konomi Island, where Nami was in her thoughts during gambling. She was thinking about her past when she lived with Miran, who was supposed to be her mother. In the current situation, she was winning because she had the queen in her cards, and when the dispute arose, she was called by Arlong. She was reaching Arlong's park, where she was kept in the iron chain for 12 years. She was trapped in her past thoughts, where she stole a map book when her mother criticized her, then she rebuked her and denied being her daughter. Her mother slapped her, and she moved. Mirani pursued her and elaborated on the story of when she was a marine who was injured on this island. Just then, she met with Nami and Nojiko. At this time, she knew she had to live for these children because they needed her most. The scene jumps to the present, where Arlong arrives and praises her talent. He could rule over the world with her, but Nami knew there was no part of her in this mission. She needed to fulfill only one promise from him and recall him again. But ignoring the promise, Arlong asked her to bring the tribute money from Cocoa Village. She refused to go there, but he had intentionally sent her to torture her because this village belonged to her. On the other hand, Garp arrived at Zeph's hotel, where both had recognized each other. Garp didn't arrive here to capture him because he had left these evil works. He was only here to inquire about his grandson, but Zeph pretended he never heard about him. So Garp decided to consume a meal here. Moreover, they reached the Cocoa Village, and the situation was devastated. Even one of the houses was up from the ground, which required a lot of power. When they moved ahead, they saw Nami was there to bring money from them. Cocoa Village was poor, so they couldn't meet the demand. Listening to this, she asked them to bring more, and Nojiko criticized her for working with cruel Arlong. Also, Nami's sight caught her crew. She moved to them and admitted she had conned them at the order of Arlong. So, they shouldn't consider her friend and stay away from her. Roronoa and Usopp had no hope for her, but Luffy and Sanji knew there was something that she was hiding from them. To reach the real reason, they have decided to meet with Nojoki. Nojoki pointed her gun at them, but she was convinced when Sanji offered to eat his cooking. She was convinced because mouth-watering food was her weakness. Aside from this, Zeph and Garp were talking about their adventures while eating. Garp was inquiring about Luffy, but Zeph always focused on another adventure. Also, Arlong's crew enjoyed the party when Nami appeared with the payment. She wanted to discuss Cocoa Village, but he refused and asked her to chill. Before she could convince him, Nezumi, Miran's captain, arrived there and hid his evil work by plundering money. This time, he had done many difficult things to hide, so he inquired about more money. So Arlong took them for a private talk and asked Nami to accompany him. Apart from this, Nojiko tells them about the horrible incident when pirates attacked their village. Their mother asked them to hide beneath the secret place and not to come out. Arlong arrived and demanded 1 million berries for one adult. She gave him, but when he was about to go, he looked at 2 extra plates, revealing more people were living. Watching the critical situation, Nami went outside. Miran had given these berries for their children's sake, and she was killed at the hands of Arlong. In the present, Luffy and Roronoa Zoro went outside and sat on the roof. Roronoa Zoro asked him not to trust Nami and Sanji, but he knew Nami must have a reason. In Arlong's park, he gives Nezumi a huge amount and humiliates humans for enslaving them, and he decides to take revenge on them. Hearing this, Nezumi brought only the contracted money and moved from here. Nami also availed the opportunity and asked him to keep the promise because she would give him 10 crore berries. When Nami was gone, Arlong told his men brought Nezumi again because he had worked for him. In Baratie, Kobe and Morgan's son were drinking when Kobe revealed all the secrets to him, and Bartender disclosed the location of Luffy. When Garp learned about Luffy's location, they preferred to move here. Further, Nami dug something near her mother's grave and took out a box. Just then, Nojoki arrived and started beating her, but Nami dodged her attack and tried to make her understand. Suddenly, Nojoki's stick bashed into the box and she found jewels. Now Nojoki was ready to listen to him. After her mother's death, Nami moved to Arlong and requested him to make her crew. Arlong doubted her because she could be dangerous. After all, he had killed her mother, so why did she want to accompany him? Also, she showed him a map she had drawn, depicting her extraordinary skills. Watching the elegant map, he had to make her crew, but one condition was that he would free her and her village when she gave him 10 crore berries. The contract was made, and she started making maps for him and did great hard work gathering the mentioned amount. Knowing the truth, Nokoji was repenting because she had always thought wrong about her. Nami also couldn't clear her misunderstanding because she didn't want to trouble anyone. At the same time, Nezumi arrived, who had taken away all the money because it was robbed. He knew the total amount because Arlong sent him. She couldn't grab her amount and let them have it because Nokoji held her. She knew they would kill her if she opposed it. When they moved, Nami chased them, but they were gone. In wrath, she had stabbed her arm, where Arlong's crew tattoo was made. It penetrated her skin, but she was stabbed again and again. Luffy suddenly arrived, held her hand, and asked her not to do so. Watching the miserable situation, Luffy decided to take revenge for Nami's tears with this monster. Also, he decides not to show mercy to him. On the other hand, Sanji noticed that Coco's village was burning because Arlong had attacked them. In the following scene, Nami could be seen tolerating the pain of tattoo. She started making a map for Arlong and attached it to the wall. Even Arlong was impressed with her, but there was an iron chain in her feet. The following day, they looked at the ruined condition of the village. Just then, villagers arrived who wanted to teach Arlong a message, but Nami refused to combat them because they were more powerful than their imagination. Still, they wanted to fight back with them because they were tired from terrifying life. Now, Luffy took the lead and decided to fight back with Arlong, and they moved to beat him like a plum. On the other hand, Garp had reached Nezumi's ship and asked him to meet with him. Nezumi was scolded for not eliminating the terror of Arlong, but Nezumi blamed everything on Luffy. Kobe took the side of Luffy because he couldn't do this kind of stuff. Nezumi moved from here, and Garp followed the steps of Luffy because he wanted to capture him. On the other hand, they had arrived at Arlong's park by throwing smoke bombs. Roronoa, Zoro, and Sanji were fighting with a crew of Arlong. Roronoa was using his sword to knock them down, and Sanji was utilizing his fighting skills. Nami and Luffy were running to the map room where Arlong could be. Roronoa Zoro was wiping their way that could lead them to Arlong. Arriving at Arlong Park, Luffy noticed an iron chain. Nami revealed she was in these chains till 12th birthday. Also, she was searching the map so that she could escape. Before they could leave this place, Arlong arrived with his ugly face. Aside from this, Usopp was running because Arlong's men were chasing him and wanted to kill him. Further, he drank alcohol and used it for shooting. Usopp lay behind the tree, which became a shield under his attacks. Also, Sanji and Roronoa Zoro were teasing each other but fighting like a team. In the map's room, Arlong accuses Nami of betraying him. But in reality, Arlong has cheated him by sending Nazumi behind her. Arlong laughed and admitted. Arlong wanted to eliminate both of them. Who knew he could rule over the world through this map? Luffy gets mad at the insult Nami when he attacks with a giant sword, then Luffy breaks his sword. He asked Nami from here because he was about to kill him, and Nami walked away. In addition, Usopp tried to shoot at him by taking a risk, but Arlong's man was shooting him, and he lay down on the ground. On the other hand, Buggy asked them to free him because his body was there. By rejoining with his body, he could help them. They had freed them, but he had betrayed them and ran away. They started to rely on their skills and face the enemies alone. In the forest, Usopp pretended to be dead, but he was alive and burnt the fish man by throwing the fiery ball at the alcohol. With a single shoot, he had killed him. Aside from this, another challenge was waiting for Sanji because the karate champion arrived and attacked Sanji. Arlong proved a complicated prey to knock down for Luffy in the map room. Arlong was throwing him at every corner of this place, and in wrath, Luffy attacked him with his gum attack, which broke his teeth but regenerated. Luffy realized he wouldn't make him lose, but he could punish him by destroying the map. So he has started annihilating the pillars. Apart from this, Karate Man insulted Nami in front of Sanji, which infuriated him. With his few moves, he had knocked him down. All friends gathered here and hoped Luffy could deal with Arlong. Luffy had thrown him to the ground floor in the map's room through his leg move. Further, this building had collapsed, and they were worried about Luffy, but he was safe and sound. He emerged from the collapsed building, and his friends started laughing together. At night, Koko's village was celebrating, and Sanji was also cooking. Here, Luffy's grandfather arrived and ordered to catch them. Kobe and Morgan's son refused to do so. Garp also challenged Luffy to fight, but Luffy tried to use his gummy attack, but he dodged it by turning his neck. Not only once, Garp had beaten him on the ground many times. He held him by the neck, but Luffy still smiled and shared his dream to become a pirate. Garp already knew Luffy was obstinate like him, and he would not listen to him. He started laughing and let them go. Nazumi persuades him to capture Luffy, but Nami hits something on his head and faints him. In the next scene, Nami was seen near her mother's grave where Nokoji arrived and asked her to stay there. But accompanying them was her dream, so she had to go. Later, Kobe appeared by bringing his poster with a reward on his head. Watching this, he embraced Kobe because what he wanted, he had gotten. By taking the map, he moved to his crew and showed them the poster. They knew, after this, pirates would chase them, so they needed to be more cautious. Not only this, their life in danger, but Luffy didn't take it seriously because they were going to Grand Line, where his dream would come true. Everyone looked at the poster, and a smile appeared on their face. Kaya, the bartender, looked proud of him because he had achieved the title of pirate. Even Buggy and Alvida became a team to catch him, and Garp was also pleased by looking at the poster. Just then, Kobe and Morgan's son arrived for the punishment, but he preferred to give them training starting tomorrow. Nevertheless, Shanks and his gang were resting when Miwok arrived and showed him Luffy's poster. Seeing this, he started jumping with happiness and ordered his crew to take out the alcohol because they wanted to celebrate their victory over Luffy. In the merry-going ship, they had planted oranges so that Nami couldn't miss her town. Also, they had prepared a surprise for Luffy, in which they placed his poster for the ship. Luffy became so happy after seeing this poster, and they moved to the Grand Line, which was his dream. In this, his crew was ready to die because they were true friends. In the last scene of this season, we looked at the mysterious person who burnt the poster of Luffy.